Hello everyone. In this tutorial we're going to have a look at configuring user roles. User roles are used to categorize people into different skill sets, and you can use them to help to schedule people to find appropriate resources based on the skill that's required to complete a task. You can also use roles in time recording, and this way you can have a look at the different application of skills across a project. Unless you employ more than 10 people, I wouldn't say that this particular feature is applicable to your organization. So if you do employ more than 10 people, let's have a quick look at it. So the first thing we do is we click on the menu. We've got the job feature enabled, job tasks and timesheets, so we can illustrate the full functionality. Because we've got those features enabled, in the system settings, we can now see we have job types, which describes the type of the project, and we have user roles. So let's have a quick look at user roles. In here, if we simulate a small IT company, we may have developers, we may have testers, and if you click on a role, you can apply a charge rate. It's worth noting that the charge rate is different from the cost rate. So the cost rate is the cost of employing someone. The charge rate would apply to chargeable projects. This is different from the billing rate. So if you imagine a situation where you have a group of developers and a group of testers and business analysts and project managers in different teams, the individuals from those teams aren't in control of what the project was sold for in terms of the price that you charge the customer. So this does allow you to run many P&Ls within different teams, but once again you don't need to use this. So essentially we define a list of roles, and then what we can do is we can define a list of project types. So we may have internal projects, we may have overheads, and we may have customer jobs. And if I click on a project type, and I can now see there's a list of roles, so I can identify which roles are applicable to each project type. So this means that if I go into a project, into a job or a project, and I click on it, a couple of things. The first is against a task. I can now define a role. So this helps. If I now go to allocate a resource, it'll show me all the developers. So this allows you to do some capacity planning, some forward planning as projects come in, and you can see how many development days are required, how many testers are required, and so on. And then once you come closer to actually doing the project, you can easily identify people because it's going to pick up the role here. It's also linked to time recording. So when it comes to entering in time, we simply click here, we select the project, and it puts in the role. Now if you don't see the role field appear on the timesheet, that means that you only have one role, and if there is only one role defined in the system, there's no need to display it. The time is automatically allocated to that. So it's a way of for us to be able to keep the UI as simple as possible for our end users. If we click on the role, we can see the three different roles. So maybe you can change it to a tester. So in a small company especially, you may have one individual who may be able to fulfill different roles on a given project. But when I entered in the time, it defaulted to the developer role, and I'll just show you where you configure that. If you go into system settings and you go to user, if I edit the user, you can see that the role field appears, so I can set up a default role. So in this particular organization, my default role is a developer. It's going to put that into my timesheet straight away, but you could allocate a different role. Very, very simple concept. So if you want to think about roles as being either a skill set or a type of activity that you do in your organization. You can define those. You can say which roles are valid for different types of project, and then you can use the role to easily identify people in that team when you come to allocate work. And then when that person records time, it will default to their role, but they could select another role. And you can, if you want to get slightly more complex, you can run an internal P&L whereby if you define a charge rate against a role, then you can see how profitable each individual is. That would be the difference between their role-based charge rate and their cost rate up here, which is a cost of employing someone. Once again, you would only need this if you're employing probably a minimum of 10 people. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next tutorial.